Multinational corporations can have revenues larger than countries, able to hold even governments to ransom. But some of these companies are now in the dock, charged with corruption, unlawful killing, and even war crimes. Charges brought by ordinary people of extraordinary courage. Over the next 5 weeks, Juliana Ruhfus tells the remarkable stories of the corporations on trial. Hello everyone, this is People in Power, Corporations on Trial. I'm Summer El-Shahad. Juliana Ruhfus begins her journey in West Africa.
Un matin, on se réveille, l'odeur, le narine. Et puis quand tu fais, il y a le sang.
It's said to be the biggest class action in British legal history, but it isn't about Britain. In August 2006, waste from the processing of crude oil was dumped in the streets and on the public rubbish tips of Abidjan, the largest city of the Ivory Coast in West Africa. Now, 30,000 Ivorians are suing a giant British-based multinational, Trafigura, claiming that it's responsible for the deaths and illness that followed. Juliana Ruhfus reports on the Ivory Coast and Trafigura, a corporation on trial.
August 2006. A ship docks in the port city of Abidjan, Ivory Coast. Trucks pull up and chemical slops are pumped into their tanks. Throughout the night, the trucks dump the waste on at least 16 sites across the city. The next morning, residents awake to an overwhelming, stinging smell. Protests break out around the capital, and international cleanup teams arrive to remove the chemicals less than 4 weeks later. Over the following months, 17 die, and around 100,000 people are diagnosed with poisoning. British solicitor Martin Day is representing 30,000 of them in the largest group action in British history.
Can we just go through to the law court's front entrance, please?
Well, in the end, the primary issue for me is to get compensation for my clients. You know, and I don't care how it comes, really, whether it drops out of the sky. I mean, if we have to go through trial, we'll absolutely go through trial. But I know from my client's view, the crucial thing is to get them compensation as much as possible, as quickly as possible.
It is our job to prepare this case so that we are ready for trial. Can we show that the toxic waste caused the injuries for your people?
In the dock is the multinational company Trafigura. It is the world's third largest independent oil trader. In 2007 alone, Trafigura had a turnover of $51 billion. Martin Day is visiting Ivory Coast before the case is heard in the UK. To make his lawsuit on behalf of the victims successful, he must focus on the exact role Trafigura played.
The way that a case works is that first issue is you've got to show that the company Trafigura here had a duty of care to the people of the Ivorian Coast and to Abidjan, and that they breached it. And that is all about us trying to show that they knew that the waste was toxic, they could have disposed of it in Rotterdam properly, they decided not to because of the price. They decided to take it down to Abidjan. They passed it to a totally too-big company that had no facilities apart from dumping it in an open waste site. So we say, for all those reasons, that they were in breach of their duty, that they were negligent, and that they should be made to pay.
July 2006. A tanker called the Pobo Koala, leased by Trafigura, arrives in Amsterdam port. According to company papers, it's a stopover to unload over 220 tons of slops. The waste processing company Amsterdam Port Services has agreed to do the job. But workers soon discover that the quantity is nearly double and that the slops give off a sickening smell. The unloading comes to a halt. An analysis is ordered and the authorities are alerted to the presence of dangerous waste on the Pobo Koala.
If you look at what this company, Trafigura, in fact is, they are getting rich by producing a substandard oil product, which they again sell to the African market. And they are doing this by doing a chemical process, an industrial process on board ships at sea. And this is exactly what happened with the Pobo Koala.
After the chemical slops have been analysed, Amsterdam Port Services tell Trafigura that the nature of the waste means higher costs for disposal. What did APS want to charge Trafigura?
The original price was €20 per ton, and the new price was €900 per ton. The Trafigura refused to pay this higher treatment cost, so they did everything to demand their toxic waste back into the Probo Koala.
5th of July 2006. The Probo Koala departs Amsterdam. Whilst at sea, a small, recently founded company called Tommy prepares to become the new recipient for Trafigura's waste in Ivory Coast. Tommy obtains its final license only 10 days before the Probo Koala arrives in Abidjan port. With Tommy, Trafigura is charged less than 7% of the price quoted by Amsterdam Port Services for the waste disposal. Human rights activist Patrick Nguyen investigated the events which led to the dumping of the waste for the Ivorian government. He now also advises Martin Day.
Donc Tommy dit qu'ils ont été saisis par Trafigura. Trafigura dit que c'est Tommy qui leur a dit qu'il avait la capacité des installations pour traiter les déchets, les slops.
Marvin Ouattara represents victims of the poisoning, and he's the only person not afraid to take us into the port to film. The Probo Koala, what sort of ship was it?
Le Probo Koala, c'est ça. C'est ce bateau, ce genre de bateau-là.
Like that one there, comme ce bateau là-bas?
Oui, oui, genre comme ça, et puis gros. C'était gros comme ça, c'était very big, c'était gros, parce qu'il a versé 528 mètres cubes de...
Ouattara takes us to see Tommy's offices. He complains that the authorities failed to carry out the necessary checks for licensing a company dealing in chemical waste.
Ils ont fait leur assemblée générale vite, ils ont eu leur papier vite. C'est pas possible. Et puis, on n'a même pas eu le temps d'aller voir où leur siège est et de voir s'ils peuvent traiter des déchets. Et puis on leur donne...
As we return to the port, we run into problems.
Well, what we wanted to film is, of course, behind us, which is the Puma Energy offices, just right behind my back, which is Trafigura's local subsidiary, but we were here for about 30 seconds. They stopped us.
August the 19th, 2006. The Probo Koala docks in Abidjan port. As darkness falls, tanker trucks pull up. The chemical slops are pumped into the trucks and driven to Abidjan's largest waste site at Aquedo. At 7:06 in the evening, the first vehicle passes the office where trucks are weighed. Shortly after, the drivers dump the slops from the tanker trucks onto the ground. The dumping of chemicals continues throughout the night and into the next morning, when most of Aquedo is in church. By now, residents are overwhelmed by nauseating smells. Mr. Charles Ngamgo, an Aquedo elder, is asked to help.
Un matin, on se réveille, l'odeur. Le narine. Et puis quand tu fais, il y a le sang. La peau là, te mange.
Did you actually see the trucks yourself, which unloaded the waste here?
Là, on n'a pas vu. Mais le dimanche, à l'heure comme ça, c'est sur le quai là. C'est moi-même qui suis venu, moi-même qui suis venu, prendre les clés du camion. Et j'ai même giflé le chauffeur.
But how can something like this happen in Ivory Coast?
Tout le monde est derrière l'argent, derrière l'argent. Ils ont pris l'argent et puis ils sont venus déverser pour tuer les gens. Ça, c'est pas leur problème. Au campement ici, là, il y a eu un qui est mort.
The site which company Tommy proposed to Trafigura as a site equipped to receive the chemical slops is in fact nothing more than an extension of Abidjan's domestic waste dump. Here, hundreds of people make a living scavenging through trash. The site is virtually unprotected and not equipped to receive any form of chemical waste.
What does this say about the way the world works, about the relationship between Africa and Europe, when you see a place like this and when you talk about toxic waste?
D'une autre façon, c'est l'esclavage, l'esclavage ça. Ça c'est le colonialisme. Vous êtes allemand. Si on devait ça en Allemagne, mais tout le monde va parler. Mais en Afrique, qui va parler?
it's difficult to know what on earth was going through the minds of the lorry drivers. There's some areas where they dumped it, Abobo particularly, which is massively populated. Yeah, it's one of the most densely populated parts of the city, and yet there were about 4 different dump sites in that vicinity.
In total, at least 12 lorry loads of waste came from the Probokuala. Bienvenue Dano Amon was another Akwedo resident alerted by the smell.
What was the reaction of the people of Akwedo? Because you all were most affected by the waste that was put here.
La première réaction, c'est de faire dégager tous les employés et d'arrêter tous les engins. La deuxième réaction que nous avons eue, on est venu ici, on a fermé le bureau. La vitre a été changée, mais ça n'a pas été changé par exemple, regardez. Vous voyez? On a tout cassé.
Who was that, you?
Oui.
That was you? C'était vous?
Oui.
You were angry. You must have been really angry. Vous étiez vraiment fâché, hein?
Très, très fâché.
There were also officials who were attacked.
Bon, il y avait des attaques, comment on appelle, physiques des personnes. Comme je vous disais, Anaki Kombena, qui est le ministre du Transport. Donc on a saccagé sa voiture. Ça lui a failli coûter la vie.
On his own inspection of the dump sites, local representatives show Martin Day how the waste was spread around Abidjan.
The first trucks came over here, and there were 3 that dumped, and then they stopped them. There was lots of trouble because of the smell, and so the rest of the message came back to the rest of the boat, to the tankers, that they could no longer dump here, so they then fanned out across the city, and then some were even dumped very close to where the ship was. So you'll see they're spread right around the city.
We would say that Trafigura had a big responsibility to know exactly what they were dumping, and yet they don't. So we will be saying to the judge, well, if there are uncertainties, don't make those uncertainties play against the claimants, make them play against the defendants.
While Martin Day is in Ivory Coast, Trafigura's lawyers are working on a change in strategy. In November 2008, the company announces that to save time and costs, they will no longer defend themselves against the charge of having neglected their duty of care. For Martin Day, this means he must now direct all his efforts towards proving causation, showing that it was the waste which caused the illness. Over the weeks which followed the dumping of the chemical waste, nearly 100,000 Ivorians registered at Abidjan's district hospitals with toxic symptoms. Martin Day hopes to represent up to 30,000 of them. For this, he relies on the support of a large team of paralegals.
We've got a team of 55 people now working just on this one case, which is a heck of a size. In fact, people have come from around the world. It's been a case that has attracted in the really massively good quality people who are obviously very keen to work on a case like this.
Martin Day's case is a group action, the most efficient way of dealing with a large number of claims against the same defendant. The paralegals collect information from the victims to see if they qualify as plaintiffs.
So you have about 3 or 4 different bits of information to check. Presumably occupation is quite an important...
No, because it's always wrong.
Is it?
Yeah. The date of consultation is always wrong as well. But,
So what are the bits that you're really looking for to give you the most comfort? Area where they live? A hospital?
age.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
To win this case, Martin Day must ultimately prove causation. He needs to convince the court that it was the toxic nature of the waste which caused the illness of his clients. For this, he works closely with some of the doctors who provided emergency medical treatment as the catastrophe began to unfold. Dr. Kwame treated over 4,000 patients.
Les gens venaient très tôt. Parce que voilà, les gens venaient très tôt. Donc, matin, quand on arrive à 8 heures, la cour est vraiment pleine. Il y a beaucoup de personnes, les enfants, les femmes, les hommes, ils attendaient.
How did you decide if people had skin damage or eye damage? How did you decide if they were likely to be caused by the toxic waste rather than some other cause?
On leur demandait si, dans l'interrogatoire, on leur demandait s'ils avaient déjà présenté ces signes auparavant. Ils nous disaient non, on n'avait jamais présenté. Et on leur demandait où ils habitaient. Ils nous disaient bon, soit on habite, on situe le lieu d'habitation, on voit que c'est à côté de la décharge ou bien pas trop loin de la décharge. Et on lui demandait, il nous décrivait un peu les odeurs qu'il a ressenties. Et par là, on concluait que c'était les déchets toxiques.
Generally, was she seeing a difference of pattern between the early days of the odours as against after the rainfall?
En fait, au début, on recevait des gens qui avaient des problèmes respiratoires et puis qui avaient aussi des saignements. Ça, c'était les premières victimes que moi j'ai reçues en consultation. Maintenant, par la suite, il y a eu d'autres signes qui se sont ajoutés. Les gens se plaignaient maintenant de céphalée, les gens se plaignaient maintenant de troubles digestifs, les gens se plaignaient. Sur les tout premiers signes, c'était des problèmes, c'était des signes respiratoires.
For days and weeks, the sick line up in the hospital grounds. As the scale of the catastrophe is revealed to the world, Trafigura director Claude Dauphin arrives for what he calls a humanitarian visit. He is promptly arrested by the Ivorian authorities, together with his West Africa manager, Jean-Pierre Valentini. For the next 5 months, both men will be held in the notorious Maka prison. Immediately, Trafigura begins negotiations, and in February 2007, a deal is reached. The multinational agrees to pay nearly $200 million, and the Ivorian presidency promises no further legal action against Trafigura on Ivorian soil. Djibi is one of the villages used as a dump site. Martin Day advised us to meet the village chief, Isaiah Motoyao.
Voilà un cas. Un cas, ce que vous voyez, elle n'était pas comme ça. C'est depuis que la chose est arrivée, voilà, tous ces signes-là.
C'est comme si c'était sa peau était.
Si elle avait mu.
Voilà. So, you've seen a doctor and you've taken antibiotics, but has it been properly diagnosed? Mais ça pique? Does it stings?
Voilà, et puis ça s'enlève. Vous voyez, c'est la peau. Vous voyez, la peau s'est enlevée, donc maintenant ça va.
Are there doctors now who are specializing with the sort of illness that you think is related to the waste?
Non, on va jusqu'à Bobo. Le médicament, un seul médicament, 5 000. 5 000, voilà.
So if you don't have money, you just use soap.
To be eligible for government compensation, victims need to be on one of the official government lists compiled by the emergency doctors. Many, like César Aloboué, who works at the Aquedo dump site, were never registered.
Dans la bouche, même la gorge, ça me fait mal. Il y a des plaies dedans. Pour manger, même là, pour manger, ça me fait très mal. Elle, pratiquement, elle n'était pas malade. Elle n'était pas malade, elle n'avait pas de maladie. Mais comme elle s'est fait enregistrer, elle a senti un peu les odeurs, elle s'est fait enregistrer. Donc ils lui ont donné de l'argent. Mais moi, personnellement, il ne pouvait pas marcher. Il ne pouvait pas marcher pour aller me faire enregistrer. Donc c'est resté comme ça.
So that means the whole way in which compensation was handed out and in which justice took place wasn't really fair.
C'est pas tout le monde qui a été dédommagé dans ce cas-là. C'est pas tout le monde. Même les vrais malades ont été laissés pour compte.
And because César failed to register, he cannot now be part of the British legal action, because Martin Day also uses the government's list of victims to decide who can become a plaintiff.
It's a great concern that people will fall through the cracks. We had to make a judgment call as to whether we accepted people without any documentary evidence. Once you do that, you're on a hiding to nothing, because people will just queue up for hours and tell you they were ill, and you've just got no way of knowing. And it just brings the whole process into somewhat disrepute and gives us no structure for it. So rather than being in a position where we just had no way of telling, we felt from the start that we really did need to have some sort of documentary proof. That means that probably a significant number of people will end up never being compensated for what they went through. But I think at times you've just got to look at the greater good in terms of what you can realistically achieve in these cases.
In the aftermath of the disaster, an international emergency cleanup team arrived to remove the chemical waste. When they left, the Ivorian government promised to finish the cleanup with compensation money received from Trafigura. But in places like Djibi, much of the contaminated ground is still waiting in bags to be collected. Impatient for results, the people of Djibi blocked the national road which leads through their village and forced the government to act.
What is this?
C'est la maternité et le dispensaire. Les deux sont confondus. Là. Ils sont en train de mettre tout sur place Et déjà, la fondation est en train de sortir.
And who's financing the building of this maternity clinic now?
En principe, c'est l'argent que Trafigura a payé. C'est une partie de cet argent-là qui sert à construire ce dispensaire et la maternité. Mais individuellement, nous n'avons rien eu. C'est-à-dire que l'indemnisation individuelle n'a pas fonctionné. Et c'est cela qui fait problème. C'est bien. Ok, plaisir.
Trafigura has consistently denied any liability in this case and has declined our request for an interview. But in a statement, the company insisted that it acted responsibly in selecting company Tommy and that it could not have foreseen that Tommy would dump the toxic waste in and around Abidjan. It says the slops in question simply cannot have led to the death and widespread injuries which are alleged. It claimed this was supported by independent experts and would be proved here at the British High Court. Last week, there was a new development, the appearance of this analysis carried out by Dutch government scientists. It indicates that among the dangerous chemicals in the Proboquala's cargo were caustic soda and hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen sulfide is so poisonous in high concentration, it was used as a chemical weapon in World War I. In response, Trafigura's lawyers again insisted the matter was for the courts to resolve. How just in a case like this is justice?
Well, I mean, that is a very complex question because, you know, you can say, well, Trafigura, their chief executive goes to prison for 4 months, they get fined effectively £100 million, and hopefully we will be successful in the cases and Trafigura will be ordered to pay a lot more and the individuals are properly compensated. So in some ways you can say actually it's a case that's worked quite well, you know, in terms of its overall pattern. I think what's not worked that well has been that there's been a strong desire, I think, within Abidjan to see Trafigura itself in the dock, actually having to defend the charges about what it did.
Cela ne peut pas rester sans réaction. Il faut forcément que ces gens-là, même si c'est quelques jours de prison qu'ils ont fait, il faut qu'ils le fassent au moins.
But do you have faith that that will happen?
Ben, je l'espère bien. Il y a l'espoir.
Martin Day's case to receive compensation for the victims is scheduled to be heard in October 2009. Trafigura may lose more money, but until international law changes, it is unlikely that the Trafigura bosses are going to face criminal charges.
That's it for this special edition of People and Power. In the next of our series on corporations on trial, Juliana Ruhfus travels to the Alaskan wilderness to report on a case of global proportions.
They get rich extracting oil and whatever non-renewable resources there are. They get rich off of that. So it's time for the oil companies and the energy companies to pay back for the damages to the environment.
That's next week. In the meantime, if you'd like to comment on today's report, we'd love to hear from you on aljazeera.net/English. That's it from me, and until next time, bye-bye.